Hello, my lovely people. Today I want to chat with you about how to make a more stylized map. And I'm just going to jump straight into it. I'm going to create a new. This is my screen resolution, 300 pixels per inch. Keep it nice and crisp. And we're going to create a 50% gray background. As I've explained before, 50% gray is my go-to starting place when it comes to doing art. You really do want everything to start on a 50% gray or neutral tone. Listen, this is going to depend on what you're doing. This is really just my go-to, what I prefer. If you want to create more cooler colors, starting off on a warmer tone will really accentuate your cooler colors. If you want a hotter experience, starting off on more cooler colors. Color theory is weird. I'm not going to get into it. I hope you noticed the improvement in my sound. I've learned a few things. I've read a few articles, done a few courses in sound design, so I hope this is better than the last time. You might still hear some clicking from my mouse, clickety click, and you might still hear my chair squeaking. But hopefully the overall sound quality is improved. As per always, I'm going to create my first group and I'm going to call this my Don't Touch group. I tend to work destructively, so you'll have to forgive me if what I do seems odd. As usual, I will create my three main groups: ocean, land, and yes, let's start with creating our basics. On top of our 50% gray, I'm going to create another 50% gray to create our first difference clouds. You want your black and white over here. You'll notice that there's a little icon here that has black and white, which will reset your foreground and background to black and white. You can swap between them by pushing X. I'm going to go to Filter, Render, Difference Clouds. We're not going to see anything because, of course, I have many layers on top of that. I'm just going to make those layers invisible for now. I'm just working in my Don't Touch group right now. Control F to rerun a filter. I run it a few times. This is a stylized map. So if it's a little bit odd and you get this weird artifacting and stuff like that, we're not going to care as much. But what we are going to do is we are going to duplicate that and run it again because we want a little bit more variation than, normal. I'm going to duplicate my gray again because these three are going to become the basis of our height map. We're going to set this to overlay, set this to overlay, and you're already going to start noticing how they start interplaying with one another. I'm going to set them to 50% though because it is a little bit extreme, and that's going to give us a really nice, if you actually go and have a look at the curves, you'll notice that the bulk of the information is kind of sitting in the middle. There's a lot of darks in here, but we're not going to worry too much about that right now. It just means that most of it's going to sit under the ocean, and we're going to crush those three together, which is going to make our first detail. I'm going to call this detail for now, just to keep it around because it's an important thing to keep. But the next thing that I want to work on is going to be our height map. So this is going to be where our land sticks through the ocean. Layer, adjustment layer, threshold. I've done this so many times and somehow I still manage to forget where everything is. And using a very soft brush, opacity 10, using white and black on our height map, we want to tease the land up. You don't want to be too harsh with this, otherwise you're going to lose detail. And we're going to tease the ocean back into the ocean. Everywhere where you want ocean, you paint black. Everywhere where you want land, you paint white. Now notice I'm painting on my height map, and the threshold is just translating that information into, where's the land going to be and where's the ocean going to be. I'm going to cut through this island so that I kind of get, two island blobs. I'm going to very, very softly, with a much less opacity, a lower opacity brush, I should say. I'm just going to come in and tease my coastlines so that they're a little bit more coherent. I want them smoother because this is an island, not a continent. And pushing X again to paint black. You go backwards and forwards, and you tease your island into looking the way you want it to look. Right, so there is our threshold on top of our height map. Now you noticed I was very careful. You don't want to go overboard because you can blow out the whites and you can blow out the blacks, and what that will do is destroy detail. You don't want to do that. It's also one of the reasons why I kept the detail map, so if you want to go and reinforce that detail you can again. But I mean, there's a lot of detail here, so I haven't done too much damage. There's my threshold. What I do want to do with my threshold, again, as I've said, is I want to go select, color range, white. And I want to create an invisible layer on top of that. And I just want to pick a green for now. Before I fill it with green, select, modify, expand, 3 pixels. As I explained before, you don't want islands that are too small, so I like to expand the selection. I've popped the layer on top of the threshold, Alt backspace, fills it with a color, and basically what this is it's just your land on its own. It's a useful thing to keep. You can actually now go and delete your threshold layer because we don't need that anymore. We've got our there we go. So basically what we've got is our 50% gray, our detail layer, our height map, and our land. The next thing that we need is the emboss. So I'm going to take my height map, copy it above that, and we're going to create the emboss. Filter, render, lighting effects. Now, if you remember what I did with the last time when I did this, we created 5-point lights following the Atlas tutorial, which I linked in the previous video. And you set your texture to green and your height to about 15. You can play around with these settings and you can create a more severe or less severe effect. But this gives you a nice texture, a nice 3D look for your land. So let's create the ocean. I'm going to enable ocean, which is where our gray copy. I put a gray layer in every single folder just because I keep forgetting and I create new layers, which is unnecessary. If you just have your gray there to start with, you don't have to worry. But I'm going to take my, do you remember our 3D, our extruded 3D thing? Words. I'm very good with words, by the way. I'm just going to call this emboss. There's our emboss. I'm going to pop it on top of our ocean. Alt, drag, copy a layer. I'm going to set that to overlay, and I'm going to set it to about, if I make it visible, we'll see what I'm doing. So what I did here was, it started like that. I've got my emboss layer on top of my 50% gray layer. I'm going to set my emboss to overlay, and I'm going to set my opacity down. The silly thing about this is, it doesn't really matter. You can set this to whatever color you like. Because it's sitting on top of a gray, it's actually not making all that much of a difference. But I like having the gray there. It's a nice background for the sake of argument. I am going to pop the 50% gray on top of that. I'm going to call this color. This is going to be my ocean color. I'm going to image, adjustments, hue and saturation, and we're going to click colorize, makes your life easier. We're going to pick a nice color for our ocean. I'm going to desaturate it, make it a little bit darker. And we're going to go overlay again. It's a little bit too gray for me, so let's go adjustments, hue saturation. Let's make it a little bit more green, a little bit more saturated, a little bit more dark. As I explained in the previous video, I like keeping my ocean layer darker than my land layer. It helps it stand out. Like if I take my land now and pop it on top of that, make it actually visible, you'll notice that the land pops a little bit more. The contrast does help. Sometimes if your land and ocean are too close to one another, it's going to be difficult to tell what's land and what's ocean. But because this is a more stylized video, I guess it's not really going to be that much of a problem. One thing that I don't like is how blobby this is. So we're going to delete this layer for now. We'll come back to our land in a bit. Let's make our ocean invisible. Let's concentrate on our land. This is incredibly blobby. And you know what? It's fine. This is a stylized tutorial. Let's stick to the feel of it. Trust the process. I'm going to make that invisible, and you know what? I'm happy with our ocean, right? This is a good look for an ocean. We are going to crush that all together. There is our ocean. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to concentrate on our land. Now I'm going to take my land layer. Remember to name your things. And I'm going to pop it inside land. Now I've got my 50% gray here. It isn't necessary, but I'm going to make it invisible because we might need it. We want our land to look like it actually has definition. So we're going to take our emboss layer, pop it on top of our land, and Control-Alt-G, clip it to the layer. So what it does is that it only sticks to where the land actually is. We're going to go to Overlay, which is, now I've got this ridiculous green. So what we can actually do is we can go to our land, go to our hue and saturation, image, adjustments, hue and saturation, click colorize. What happens is that if you don't click colorize, any adjustments you make here is going to be relative. So when you move it closer to the red, it's going to make your image more red. But you can slip right past red because obviously this should be more of a wheel than just a straight line. But if you click colorize, the color that you point to, like if you click on blue, it's going to be blue. If you click on yellow, it's going to be yellow. If it's not colorized, it's going to be relative to what your original color was. So make it colorized. Let's go for a nice, it's going to be a stylistic look. So I'm going to go for a very, very, very neutral and bright yellowy green, right? So that's a good look for an island. And right now, I'm going to squash those two together because I like that. What I want is, I want an outline for this island that has that cartoonish cartography, hand-drawn feel to it. So, but I want that information on a completely separate layer. So I'm going to copy, good Lord, here we go, land. Again, I do like to name everything. The first one's going to be called land, the second one's going to be called effect. I'm going to keep my effect layer visible, and on top of this we can apply our effects. Again, I like a nice strong stroke around the land. You can keep it thicker. I'm going to do 2 here, and I'm going to set it to center because it runs around the edges better. You can set it to outside, but it tends to reinforce that blobbiness. You can set it to inside, but then you're going to lose detail. So center is a good compromise between the two. I'm going to do an outer glow. The reason I do an outer glow and not a drop shadow is because later you might want to include a shadow. Play around with it. You're going to get different effects, and what I do isn't necessarily what you want to do. But for the sake of this tutorial, I'm adding an outer glow. You're going to want to change your blend mode to normal and the color to black. So what you get is this shadow-like effect, like a glow from underneath. You want to set that to precise, so it follows the outline of the coast. And this is where the first real stylization comes into play, is we're going to play with this contour. I'm going to set it to anti-aliased. I have no idea how to actually pronounce that. Anti-aliased? Anti-aliased? I've only ever read it. Anyway, double click on your contour. Oh, let me double check that. single click on your contour, and I'm going to click along this line, creating a few points. The reason is I don't want anything to really go above this line into this space here. I want the areas closest to my coast to be dark, and I want the areas furthest away from my coast to be practically invisible. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm actually going to pull this line, all of these dots, just a little bit down. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the in-between bits down and away to basically make them invisible. And what this is going to do is it's going to give you this lovely effect. It almost looks like ripples. Now, this is rather extreme even for a stylized look. So if you go to your outer glow and you reduce your size, it'll, like the bigger you set it, the more extreme it'll be. Your spread is basically where it starts. So if you push it away from your coast, it'll start further away from your coast. But I like to keep the spread under 5%, if not 0. You know what? That's good. Let's go with that. So as I said, we have our land, and we have our land with an effect, but I want the effect on its own. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the fill and knock it out. So what that does is it makes all of the pixels invisible, but it keeps the effect visible, as opposed to if we were to play with the opacity, it makes everything invisible, and we don't want that. We want our effect visible, so we knock out the fill. What that does is it keeps us our land and it keeps us our effect, and combining them it'll look the same, but now we can play with the effect on its own without messing around with the land. The first thing that I want to do with the effect is actually make it rougher, make it destroyed a little bit. In order to do that, we have to create a little bit of a texture. I'm going to take my 50% gray, pop it over here, and we're going to create some noise. We're going to add noise, and 100. 100's a bit much. We're getting a bit of a grid there. Let's go 50. There's still a grid there, but we're going to get rid of it. We're going to go filter, blur, motion blur. I'm going to set it to about 60. So what we get is these lovely stripes. The reason you want that is because basically I want this to be the little cutouts where it's, I want this information to cut into our stylized little rings around our islands. But it's not quite extreme enough. So let's go to our curves and make it a little bit more extreme so that our rise through it is a little bit steeper. What that's going to do is that it's going to make the cuts more extreme. Where we want the information, it's going to be more stark, and we want the information invisible, it's going to be actually invisible. So we're going to copy our effect. I usually like to keep one version of the effect untouched, so that when I apply the destruction layer, I can bring in the effect underneath it to kind of reinforce it. But let's ignore that for now and have a look at this. We're going to clip our effect. Oh, actually, this is very important. Before I even do that, I want to take my effects and I want to rasterize them. So you're going to select your effects, rasterize, layer styles. What that does is it's going to, now we've taken the land out completely, right? And we've applied an effect. So those pixels are still there. And the effect exists, but it's there as information. It's not actually pixels drawn. When we layer, rasterize, apply that effect, it's going to actually create actual pixels. This is now real information that we can work with. This is now empty information. There's nothing there. Even you'll notice your fill's back to 100% because this is now the information that you're going to be working with. I've got 2 copies of my effect as before, but we're just going to work with the top one for now and take our texture and apply it, if you apply the right layer, Charles, and apply it to our little concentric rings. So you'll notice here that you've got a lot of damage done to the rings, but the white and the black are both still showing. I'm going to squash those two together, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to select multiply. So what you'll notice is, if I click in the right spot, everywhere where there's been black, it'll show up. But everywhere where there's white, it won't show up. So it causes a little bit of a damaged effect. Now what you can do is that if it's too much for you, you can bring in your original one underneath and you can drop the opacity a bit. Now I quite like the amount of damage I've done to this effect, so I'm just gonna squash them together. Oh, okay. This is a weird thing that Photoshop does, is sometimes your layer effects don't stick. Just reselect the effect that you want and it will, you know, pop right back. But yes, so there's some lovely damage that's been done. It's not too severe. The trick with Photoshop, and this is a wonderful thing that I want everybody to actually, it's your take-home tip from Charles today, is use severe effects on low opacity. You want to use severe effects lightly. So let me show you an example. I'm going to create a 50% gray over everything. Let's introduce our land back, for instance. So let's pretend this is now our map. I want to create a texture over this entire picture, right? So let's go filter, filter gallery. Here is our texturizer. Now we're gonna keep it to the, you know, the 100% scaling. Actually, you can scale that down a little bit, 80% relief 4. And then what you want to do is you want to take this layer, curves, and do the same thing again. We want to give it quite a severe cut through. So what that does is it gives you that texture quite severely. But now when you overlay it, you drop your opacity. So you get that lovely paper look, but you still have quite a lot of dynamic range to work with. So say round about there. And this gives you a lovely stylized map that looks more storybooky rather than, you know, something you would see in satellite photography. You can, as always, go in, here's my land layer. I'm going to create a invisible layer on top of that and clip it to that, and then you can come in with your color paints and start. Oh, I'm still very low opacity. Let me set that up to something I can actually use. It's only a tutorial, so I'm going to be quite speedy with this, but you can now, that's very bright, Charles. You know, come in and paint in different areas. Oh, that's why. You want to set your color layer to overlay. Overlay is a magic thing. It helps. And then yes, you really want to come in and tease in. These are horrific colors. Let's choose better colors, Charles. Okay. Yes. So you can come in and paint in your colors on, you know, depending on what sort of terrain you're working with. If you want it very barren, you can gray it out. A light gray for snow is always going to look better than a pure white, because what a pure white is going to do is you're just going to lose all definition. Yes, but you know, like a nice gray painted on top, you're going to get your snow effect. let me stick to the original color that we were working with just for the sake of this tutorial. And I want to show you, okay, always save your work. So save your work, desktop, map, there's my map. Right. This is the point where I really want to back up. So I'm going to take my ocean and my land. So everything that makes up the information that I'm working with, right? Back it up. We're going to create a group. This is the whole map. And I'm going to back that up, pop it into my Don't Touch folder. Alt, click, drag, makes a copy. So what I can do is I can take my whole map, flatten it out, so it's just its own little layer. I've got all of my information in my Don't Touch copy right there. But now I've got a nice flat version that I can carry on working with. You don't have to do this. I just do this for the sake of speed. The thing that I really want to do here is that this is still not stylized enough for me. So I want to take my emboss layer from earlier and I want to overlay it. Now this is quite extreme, but we can bring it down a little bit. Obviously to your taste, but another thing that you can do is, let's say you really like the darkness in the ocean here, you can take that emboss layer, put a mask on it, and gently paint with a very light brush around your islands to brighten them up a bit, so that your ocean still seems deep. Actually, this is a really nice alternative to that ocean shelf thing that I showed you before. That's actually something to note. I'm going to remember that. This is a bit extreme, so I'm just going to drop that a little bit. I quite like that. I'm going to paint with a grey instead, so that all my detail pops through. I've been doing this for years, and I always surprise myself when I discover something that I've never seen before. But, I mean, you get the idea. Another nice thing to do is, okay, let's say we like that, so we're going to crush those two together. I'm working quite quickly for the sake of this tutorial, but another thing to give it that more stylized look is I've got a copy of my image, and I'm going to my filter, and I'm going to artistic and poster edges. Poster edges is a very intense stylization to give it. I like my posterization all the way up. Edge intensity 1, edge thickness practically nothing. You can play around with edge thickness, but you don't want too much. And then what you do is that you can also do your overlay, and then very subtly, even if you want to multiply, you're going to get a lovely effect on top of that. Just gives it that little bit more stylization. Another thing that you can do is you can bring your emboss layer, filter, other, high pass. What that does is a high pass will always pull out the most interesting fine details. So when you overlay that on top of something, it's very subtle. I don't actually know if you can see it on this recording. So off, on. Do you notice how it sharpens your mountain contours? Actually, if I repeat the process, you'll actually notice it becoming very extreme. Again, use extreme effects, but sparingly. So just drop it like that. And here's much more of a stylized map look for you. We've still got our land information, right? Let's create regions. Right, so these people over here, let's say they've got their own little kingdom. I'm going to cut and paste. Now you'll notice if I paste, it's going to stick it right in the middle of my canvas. And I don't want to do that. I want to Control-Shift-Paste, Control-Shift-V, and that'll paste it right back in place where I cut it from. I'm going to take this land and I'm going to cut it in half. Let's say there's these people here have their own little kingdom. Cut, Control Shift, paste. So what I've now got is I've got 3 distinct countries. And what I'm going to do is that I'm going to take that fill, drop it a little bit, and we can apply effects. So let's add a stroke and an inner glow. And what that's going to do is that you can demarcate different areas in different countries doing this. You don't even necessarily need to add a stroke. You know what, that actually kind of helps. If you want to take that information, you can right click, copy on an effect, copy layer style, and paste your layer style onto other areas. And then you can obviously go and change, you know, let's say these are people whose national color is purple, or take these people and their national color is red. Obviously your blend mode is going to play a huge role in how this information is translated, but again, severe effects sparingly, drop your opacity. Yes, and obviously with this sort of effect, particularly the sort of effect where you are popping a lot of extra information, I would drop my fill right out. So you just get your effect applied on top without it adding all of those extra pixels on top of that information, losing all of the detail that you've worked so hard to create. Actually, I'm going to copy this. Let's go copy layer style. I'm going to paste layer style. Paste layer style, make them visible, and you can see the sort of effect that creates. Let's go to this inner glow, make that blue. Let's go to this one's inner glow, make that nice pink. This is a very extreme border here, so you're going to probably want to play around with that stroke and make it 1 pixel. Each. And there you've got a lovely stylized map. Obviously you can now go and I'm just going to flatten all of this. This is just for the tutorial purpose. And now you can go and create your cities and things on top of it as you usually would. I'm just going with my usual colors that I always use. And you can say, oh, this one's capital sits over there, and this one's capital sits over there, and this one's capital sits over there. And then you can have your smaller city. Oh, that's a bit of a blob there, Shawl. You can have other cities sitting in hilarious and unlikely places. Remember, cities will generally sit along a river or on the water somewhere, you know, for realistic sake. But as before, you know, add your information, add your shadow. Remember to let your shadows agree. You don't want shadows pointing off in all the wrong directions, because then your map won't look believable. Let's increase that spread. I'm now just, you know, repeating information I've shown you before about how you can create landmarks and things like that. Let's create some roads. That's a very big road. And let's say that road goes around the mountain, and there we go. Boop. This is a very hurried, because you want to pop your roads under your cities, give your roads a nice bevel. Set your bevel to down so it looks like the roads get dug into the ground, and set your size quite shallow, and then you get some lovely roads. Obviously play around with this, and I'm going to leave it there. I think this is a really good example of how you can create some nice stylized maps. I hope you guys have a wonderful evening. Take care of each other and stay safe out there.